Welcome to CSE Healthcare Systems Open RIO web recording. This is section V2, Registration and Management of Key Relationships. We start with V2.1, Demonstration of Patient Registration. I'm going to use my one-step register and refer menu item so that RIO will first check to see if my client, I'm using the NHS number as the search item here, is registered on RIO. And if not, it will then search the Spine Personal Demographic Service, or PDS, where it has found the client. And I can simply use the check boxes to select the spine information supplementing with any local items that I require and pull this record into RIO. Should I forget to check any of the items, RIO will remind me and tell me which item I need to pay attention to. V2.2, Demonstration of Social, Family and Professional Care Networks. As you've just seen, selecting the one-step menu item has dropped me straight into the RIO referrals page once the registration for my client has been completed. Here, I can use a referral template to quickly make a referral and also ensure data integrity for reporting purposes. I've now added the RIO services contacts that are involved in the care of this child, and I'm going to move on to look at personal contacts. For this, I'm going to take you back to the registration page where you can see that RIO always clearly shows me the data that is recorded on the spine, the national data, and the local data that's recorded for my client, and will highlight for me in yellow anything that is out of sync. This version of RIO uses our new sophisticated synchronization status check so that it will only highlight truly out of sync records. For instance, it will recognise things like uppercase and lowercase letters are the same, and it will ignore things like punctuation and blank spaces in comparing the record. The fact that RIO continues to link with the spine means that I will always be aware of any details such as address changes that have been updated within this clear comparison page. We came here to add some personal contacts for our client. Where the client has a spine-linked record, you can view and edit both the RIO and spine contacts. I can add a contact to share with the spine, or indeed a new spine contact can be pulled into RIO. Personal contact types pull from a locally defined list of relationships. I've chosen to add the minimum of data here, but I could go on to add other things like contact telephone numbers, emails or language. A setting on the locally defined personal contacts list will enable relationships that are flagged as family to be pulled into the RIO Family Management page from the Personal Contacts page. So if I select Family Details, you can straight away see that the contact that I added as a father has pulled through as a non-RIO client family member. I can also add other members of the family. So let's do a search for Joan's baby sister. And add them into the record as a sibling. And because Baby Green also has another full sibling recorded, that too has pulled into the record, and we're beginning to see a family build up. I click back into Add Members, and I'll just choose somebody else at random. I'd just like to show to you the list of relationships and point out that this is a locally configured list. I've added this item to remind me to say that, and that RIO can pull together and handle quite complex family links so that you can build up a full picture of a family. Lastly, within child health, I'll show you that there is a special place where, as part of the birth details process, you can include the mother of a child, and save that into the record. And if we return to registration details and use our family details link, you can see that that too has saved into the record. Finally here, professional contacts can be recorded in RIO. For instance, contacts with care networks or social services. These pull from a locally defined table of relationship types. I'm going to use social services as an example for you. Now, let's see how that information can be pulled together by viewing the clinical portal and its summary pages. I've got a tab in my locally defined portal that summarises all of the client's contacts. So I've got here an example of the open referrals and the RIO relationships for this client. I have the professional contacts listed here and family details in this panel. Should I have booked any appointments for the client within RIO, these could also pull into another tab panel here. To drill down to see more information in any of these areas, I simply click in and I can see the further details. Section 2.3, Associate Functionality, Finding, Opening, Creating and Merging. We start this section with looking at how to find a record within RIO. I'm going to use one of my top menu items to show you the search. You can see here the last client, the record I've been into, will always display to me in the top, and clicking go will take me straight into that record. I also have a checklist of clients whom I've recently been into, and clicking the go next to them will take me into that record. Lastly, I can search for a record, which I can do either by using a single identifier, such as the NHS number, or an alternative system number, which will again, as it's a unique identifier, take me directly into the client record. But I can also use the bottom part of the search section to search using the kind of details that a client might give you when they're speaking to you over the telephone or coming in to book an appointment. So, for example, here, to find Joan Green, I can either put in the whole of Joan or I can use some wildcards. I can search including gender and date of birth, exact match, or extending that to a time period. And I can select whether I want to search for people who are clients, carers, or clients and carers. Whether to use Soundex, to turn on aliases, or to search only for inpatients. So here, using the green search, I'm going to look for Sylvia Green. We've already been into the record for Sylvia Ash Green. When I click into that, I've got a Sylvia Green and a Sylvia Ash Green. And that's because Sylvia Ash Green used to be called Sylvia Green, and I've saved that as an alias. I've then got my date of birth field here I can use to validate which is the correct record that I want to go into. The same search function is used throughout RIO for finding clients, so that, for example, if I want to search for a client for a diary appointment, I use the same tool to search, and then once a client has an appointment, the hyperlink will take me directly into their record so that I no longer have to search. Once I'm in the record, I've got the clinical portal with all its panels, including this case record panel, which allows me access to any part of the record that I have been granted access by my systems administrators. For instance, I have assessments here that I will require as part of my job, and can easily access those. That covers finding and opening a record. Let's move on to creating a new record. For this part, I want to take the example of Joan Green, record I've been previously using and who we registered on RIO from the PDS at the beginning of this demonstration, and use a scenario whereby Joan was brought in by her grandmother, who speaks very little English, to one of our RIO clinics, and so we were not able to get accurate data about who the child was, leaving no option but to make a new temporary record. Let's say, for example, that the grandmother had given the surname as Ash. The mother's name is Ash Green, so that's understandable, and she'd called her Jeannie. She may well have said Joni, but it sounded like Jeannie. She was able to tell them that the child's date of birth was the 10th of February, and we can guess that it's 2012 from looking at the age of her. When we do a search of RIO, we have no record match here, which doesn't surprise us because we already know that we haven't got the right details here. Now, I could return to search criteria and search under a different set of criteria if I had more information to do that. I don't, so I'm going to continue to search national records. Being reminded to add the gender, and I can tell that she's a girl. And then I'm going to go on and do an advanced search. And understandably, I have no results to find. So I'm going to create a new registration. I'm warned that I need to make this a local registration unless I want to create a new spine record, which I don't. So I'm going to make a new local only record. I'm going to add in any of the details that I know the answers to. In my address search, I'm going to use unknown. And And I'm going to do the same in my GP search. And then I'm going to create a local only record. Now, at this point, RIO has come up with someone in the system who it thinks could possibly be a match. I might at this point have enough information or know somebody who can tell me that that is definitely the case, but with the situation I'm in, I'm not able to do that, so I'm going to continue to register and just note that I could well be making a duplicate record here. Creating that record has now nicely lined us up to show the last part of this section, which is merging a patient record. Okay, I've now swapped into my systems administrator role, you can tell from the number of icons I've got across the top, so that I can merge our Jeannie Ash, who is really Joan Green, in as one record. This is a systems administrator's function only in most trusts, although whoever you give it to on a B code will be entirely up to you in OpenRIO. I select Client Merge, and I'm going to choose my first client, and my second. And here you can see a quick summary of the clients and who they are. And I'm going to merge from Jeannie Ash to Joan Green, which is my correct record with an NHS number in it. If they were the wrong way round, I could swap them. RIO will now warn for me of anything that might be things I would consider to ensure that I have got the correct clients. Here it's telling me that the postcodes are different. I know that because Jeannie Ash has got an unknown postcode. And it also gives the dire warning that this process is not reversible. I'm going to click Continue. And RIO will take just a few moments to go through and check those records and work out which parts to merge from where. It's now given me a report saying the clients have been successfully merged, and it telling me the tables that have been updated, which in this case is very few because the record that was a temporary record was not open for very long. And I can see the merge log if I wish to. Section 2.4, Management of Clinical Records in Special Cases. And in this section, I'm going to take you through the list of special cases that you have provided. Firstly, we're going to have a look at how RIO handles false names or aliases. Now, I touched on this a little earlier when updating the name in order to do the client merge. Here I'm going to change the name of Mr. Macbeth to make him Hamish Hastings. We'll save that into the record. And RIO has popped up to ask me if I would like to set the old name as an alias. And I'm going to say yes. Now the record's been returned to me, I'd just like to show you that on doing a search for Hamish Macbeth, what I get back as my result is Hamish Hastings. Our next scenario is a person who is given no name at all. Now, most RIO records will be pulled from the spine, so the name details will be included. However, should you wish, you can make a local registration with anonymous names, and the RIO client ID can serve as your unique identifier. Next, we need to look at identifying the results from adoption. The way RIO works here is dependent on the way the National Spine handles the adoption. If the spine creates a new NHS number and marks the old as invalid, RIO will remove the NHS number from the local cache of the record, so that the record will be reverted to a local only, with a banner similar to the one here, which will contain locally configurable text informing the user that the record is invalid on the PDS. Locally configured workflow can be set up to notify those involved in the care of the child that has been adopted, so that they're aware that the record has been marked as invalid on the PDS and can take appropriate action. That might mean that a new spine record needs to be imported from the PDS, and then where appropriate, according to local guidelines, merge or manually transfer the data from the old record and logically delete it. We're now going to look at how RIO handles a change to a patient's gender. Gender can be updated in RIO, as I'm showing here on the local record. But gender is a legal status, and gender reassignment is a fairly complex process, normally resulting in NHS number change and the need to make a new record, which will need expert opinion on what should or should not be included from previous records. Where these changes involve the spine, the new NHS number will drive those changes. Lastly, we cover a child that has been adopted away from parents or adopted by a parent. The first steps in this process is often that the child is a looked after child, and RIO forms can be defined to support the recording of care here. Then, as I mentioned earlier, the way RIO handles the record for adoption will depend on the way spine handles this. In some cases, mainly away from parent adoption, the old NHS number is normally marked as invalid, and local policy can be followed around what should or should not be included in the new record once it has been pulled from the spine. However, there will be cases, such as in family adoption, where the result might only be a supersede record received from the spine rather than an invalid flag, and you will be able to continue to use the same record. Changes in identity associated with the witness protection. RIO supports the use of the S flag, which suppresses details of address or items which may lead to the knowledge of address, such as a GP, from any user who doesn't have access with a specific B code. In some cases, this can be used for witness protection. And where the identity is completely changed for witness protection, a new NHS number will be allocated, much in the same way as I've shown you for adoption, and a new record will be imported from the spine. In addition, as I'm demonstrating here, RIO has the ability to restrict records to prevent people from entering them to find out any details such as addresses or things that would lead to the whereabouts of somebody on a witness protection plan should there be a need. This completes CSE Healthcare's Open RIO demonstration for Service User Registration and Management of Key Relationships V2. Thank you for listening.